Hello everybody and welcome back to Keeping Up With, the online conversation series where I keep up with your favourite public figures during COVID and we talk mental health and self-care. Today I'm interviewing Georgia Moot, who is a fashion model. Georgia has been seen on Vogue Arabia. She has also been involved in fashion shows with Charlotte Knowles, Hubert Lang and Jean Paul. And today we're going to be talking about self-care, mental health and keeping up with Georgia. So I hope you guys are excited just as I am. We're going to wait for Georgia to join us, and then once Georgia has joined, we will get the conversations started. While we're waiting, guys, comment below, how are you feeling today? We're just going to wait for Georgia to join us now. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Georgia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. Just trying to I feel like there's a
That's
lot of
good.
room above me. I'm trying to figure it out.
It's all okay.
Figure it out. There we go.
Good. But yeah, thank you for allowing me to interview you today. I'm super excited to talk with you, particularly about mental health, because I know you have openly spoken about mental health and I know you advocate for mental health. So I know today's going to be a great discussion. So a big thank you to BB as well, because she was the person who recommended you. So we have to thank her. So thank you so much.
The angel.
Definitely. So Georgia, how have you been? How are things?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right. It's a bit of a weird time, like coming out of lockdown. It's like that weird, it's almost, I'm finding it almost weirder to kind of get to grips with now than when we were actually in lockdown. Because I feel like at least during lockdown, everyone was in the same boat. We all kind of knew what was what and who was who. And in a weird way, it's kind of comforting because like people who hadn't necessarily struggled with their mental health before were struggling and being like, oh, I actually understand like how you're feeling. Whereas now when things are opening up and like things are opening up at different rates and like people's normals are like coming back but in different ways, it's like it's quite tricky to get on board with, but I think I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay.
And that's good to hear that you're doing okay. I'm happy that things are going well for yourself, and we will talk a bit more about your career and how COVID has been for you. Just touching on what you said about, you know, going back to the new normal, and with everyone's normal being different, and it kind of being at different stages. So some people may still be working from home, some people may not be working from home. And I also loved how you mentioned about mental health, where you said some people who necessarily didn't understand about mental health or weren't experiencing any form of mental health difficulties can now understand and now resonate with those who have been experiencing mental health. And so this is the whole point of our conversations, is to engage healthy conversations and just to speak about mental health. So I know for yourself, you have spoken openly about your mental health, and you've spoken about your anxiety. So with COVID, how was your mental well-being?
You know what? It was probably not great, but because I knew that it was like directly correlating to situational factors, I was kind of trying to let myself off. So like it wasn't, my anxiety was not great, but it also, I didn't have that kind of extra like guilt or like, you know, sometimes when you feel like you're not necessarily coping in normal day-to-day life, you get a bit like, oh God, I should be, and like everyone else is coping with. Because it was, I kind of had a solid reason as to why I would be feeling worse than normal. I felt a weird sense of ease with it and a weird sense of like discovery and acceptance of not feeling great, which was actually quite nice because I'm so used to having a particularly anxious patch or maybe struggling a bit and kind of then having the pressure on top of that to not feel that way. Whereas I think in this time it was like, no, it makes sense, you know, it makes sense. You kind of have to be kind to yourself. I mean, my boyfriend, I live with my boyfriend, he had to go back home. All my family live in the States, so like it was understandable why I wouldn't be feeling like on top of the world, because everything had changed. So it was quite reassuring in some ways, but yeah, no, it wasn't fun, definitely not. It was uncomfortable at points, but I think it was very necessary. And like I was saying to my friends, I see it as like a massive privilege that that was all I had to focus on, you know, like all other pressures were kind of removed, and all I did have to focus on was my mental health and how I was feeling day to day. You know, like I had a roof over my head, I didn't have financial worries, I didn't have I'm not a key worker, so there were so many things, that pressures that were kind of actually removed, and just made it very much like focused on how I was doing.
Definitely. And I love how you touched upon when you said your anxiety, and how you had a kind of better understanding as to why you were feeling anxious, and you can link your anxiety to COVID. And so due to that, you felt kind of less guilty about your anxiety, and you kind of judged yourself less in relation to that. And that's very interesting, because, you know, not many people will be able to kind of judge themselves less, or kind of cope with the anxiety due to COVID. But for yourself, it was kind of like the opposite. You know, you had your reasoning, and you're able to kind of almost emphasize with your own self, and understand that, you know, it's okay, I'm feeling anxious because of this, and, you know, everyone is experiencing the same thing, so we're all kind of in the same boat here. So the fact that you were able to recognize your anxiety and understand where it was coming from, how were you managing your symptoms of anxiety during those times?
Honestly, because I feel like there was some points during it where a lot of people were like, I'm going on runs, I'm doing this, I'm baking, like, yeah, I'm feeling stressed, but here's how I'm coping.
Yeah.
Honestly, sometimes I didn't really cope, and that was how I coped. Like it kind of, I think I employed a lot of like survival mechanisms in being like, listen, you have nothing else to do right now other than survive. You don't have to think about sending these emails, you don't have to think about these social pressures. Like, just try and strip everything back, and like just take care of the day to day, and like take each day as it comes. Because there were some days where like my routine that I would typically have went completely out the window, and like all the stuff that was opposite to what people usually advise to help with your mental health, like having a routine, exercise,
Yeah.
like the kind of typical self-care things, kind of went out the window for a little while. Like, and it was trying to be okay with that, and be okay with the fact that maybe it wasn't like kind of a picture perfect idea of like self-care and what I should be doing to make myself feel better, but that, to be honest, all I really needed to do was like get through day by day. I didn't need to be like, you know, overachieving, overly productive, overly this. Like, I just needed to get through it, and if that meant like randomly going to bed at one night at 2 a.m., then that was gonna be it. Like, we're here.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for your honesty in saying that, you know, there were days where you thought, you know what, if I can't cope, then that's okay. Because I feel that sometimes when we find it difficult to cope, we kind of put that added pressure on ourselves and say, you know, no, I need to cope. But you've just
Yeah.
clearly explained that, you know, there will be days where you can't cope, and that's okay. You know, don't put too much pressure on yourself to cope, because sometimes our body just needs to heal. Sometimes our body we just need to sleep, we just need to lay in bed, we just need to, you know, not do anything at this moment of time to kind of heal our mind, body, and our soul. So thank you for being so honest with that, and, you know, actively saying that, you know, there were just days where I just didn't do anything.
But it's true, and also I think it's
Yeah.
so important, because I think to eradicate some of the stigma, you do need to be honest about having those days. Because like, if you're struggling and then everyone is being like, yeah, I have XYZ, but look, I still get up every day, and it's like, for some people that's not a reality, and it doesn't have to be super severe or bad. It's like you said, sometimes you just need days where like it's not working, or like you need to rest, or like, cool, maybe you haven't physically left the house or like physically done anything, but mentally you're a bit tired, and that's cool, especially during a pandemic. Like,
Oh yeah.
anxiety and mental illness is draining mentally, and I don't think people always cut themselves the slack that they need. Like if you'd run a marathon, you'd be like, oh yeah, I need to rest up, like I need to, but
Exactly.
if you run a mental marathon, people are still like, why am I still not doing, oh my god, I feel really tired today, I had a nap. And it's like, that doesn't make you a bad person. Like that doesn't mean you're not coping. If anything, I think it's quite a healthy way of coping.
Definitely. And I love that analogy that you just used about running a marathon. So, you know, when you run a physical marathon, after that marathon, your first thought is, you know what, let me go to bed, let me rest, let me drink water, let me just, you know, relax.
Eat what I want, drink what I want. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the same for, like you said, a mental marathon. So when we experience difficulties, whether it be anxiety, depression, panic attacks, anything mentally, it is a mental marathon. You know, your mind is racing. And so it's okay to kind of have that time to just do absolutely nothing. And for me, one of the things that I particularly encourage my clients to do is stillness. So practicing stillness. So it's so important at times to just be still and just be mindful. And that really, really helps with gaining that clarity of mind and just finding that inner peace. So that's a really good analogy. I'm going to steal that analogy off of you.
It's yours.
I'm going to steal that one. So, Georgia, you're a model, and I
Yes.
can imagine being a model, you're traveling, very beautiful model indeed. So, yeah, you're a model. I can imagine you're always traveling, you know, you're involved in fashion campaigns, photo shoots, magazine covers. What was it like when COVID was announced? How did it impact your modeling career in any way?
Yeah, it did. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm so privileged that financially that wasn't necessarily a worry. I mean, it was a worry up until the government announced the kind of support scheme that they were doing.
Yeah.
Because also for a lot of freelancers or a lot of models, it's like you do a job and then you don't get paid at the end of the month like everyone else does. You can get paid anytime, like literally 3 months to like if they're late, like a year, whatever. You're not like, you don't have a constant stream of income every month. So that definitely was like an anxiety at the beginning when it was first announced. And then, yeah, like I said, when the government announced that they were doing a kind of the scheme to help, that was a bit of weight, like financial weight lifted off. But it was definitely slightly scary in terms of like my mental well-being. So like financially it was kind of okay, but yeah, mentally I definitely was a bit worried because I think, well, yeah, when you're freelance, you don't have a guaranteed work schedule anyway. And then to have that completely taken away, it was like you're already in normal life worrying about when you're next going to work and like when the next check's coming. And then suddenly the world is being like, you're definitely not working for at least X amount of months. So it was definitely a bit anxiety inducing. And like, I definitely find work and any form of routine quite like grounding and something that I can really kind of grab onto to make me feel like a bit calmer and a bit like, you know, something to measure myself against. And like, yeah, I definitely struggled with the idea of not having anything to do. And I think that's maybe also why I was kind of like, my routine went to the wind and I just kind of threw it all out. So I was like, well, you don't have your normal routine. Like even your normal routine isn't very normal, and now you don't even have that. So
yeah, definitely. It was a big shake for people. As you mentioned, you know, being a freelancer, you know, you're not guaranteed work all the time. But then as COVID hit, it was like, okay, so now I'm not guaranteed work for X amount of time. So you're very strong in relation to, you know, being able to manage that and being able to really understand that, okay, my new normal is changing and I'm now going to have to adjust to a new normal. But, you know, that's okay. I'm going to continue to take care of myself in the moment, which leads on to my next question, which is, what did you do to take care of your self-care? What were the things you did?
I think, well, firstly, like we were saying earlier, kind of trying to go easy on myself, trying to kind of, I guess, like you said earlier, it was stillness. I probably didn't see it like that at the moment because it felt quite chaotic in my mind, but it was stillness. It was like just kind of giving in to what my body and my mind needed, feeling a sense of awareness and understanding how I was feeling, even if it wasn't comfortable, and a lot of times it was very uncomfortable. Just making sure that I was checking in and understanding that and sitting with it, as opposed to like where I would normally just kind of distract myself and like, you know, hide it under the rug. It was kind of like learning that stillness and learning that acceptance. And then also in terms of like physical things that I did, I would call a lot of my family and friends, because again, like I said, I was alone, so I definitely found that like having strong lines of communication really helped, and just like picking up the phone, even though sometimes even that can be a bit overwhelming, you know, if you're like feeling a bit all over the place, and or you're just having a really lazy day, and it can sometimes be like, I mean, I think everyone got booked up with Zooms and whatever in the time. It was like almost busy. I was almost busier on the phone than I would be like in normal life, you know. It was like, so I've got this,
the phone was the new normal.
Exactly. I was like, so I've got this call then, and then that call, and then I've scheduled this call, and then blah blah, and then I have to think of the time difference and all that. And but yeah, no, I did. It really, really helped. Like calling my boyfriend every night to have that kind of routine and like that anchorage. Calling my family very often, and like just really making sure that I stayed on those lines of communication. And then once we were able to see people, seeing friends, it was like invaluable, just like making myself leave the house, meeting up with people, obviously at like a safe distance and everything, but just going to the park. Like I noticed how much my mental health improved when I could do that. And it sounds so simple. It's like, oh, just not seeing people, you know. I was like, oh, it must be something else. I'm really going through it in this month. And then I saw people and I was like, oh no, it's just that.
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. Communication is very important. And, you know, I'm very thankful for the Zooms and the house parties and all the different kind of online communication methods that we can kind of keep that communication and keep that engagement, because that's all everyone had to kind of lean on. All we had was literally a phone and a laptop, and that's the only way we were communicating. And it's nice that everyone was kind of communicating with each other and everyone was checking in on each other. And you know, we heard on the news that mental health was increasing, so it's like now more than ever is a time for people to keep up with each other and check on each other and see how we're doing, and you know, how are you feeling mentally, you know, how are things going with you. We know you're by yourself, and people, I feel like people were a bit more aware. So as you said, you were by yourself, I'm sure your family would have been aware of that, and they would have been calling you and kind of checking up on you, because they know that, oh, Georgia's by herself, let's call her and check up on her. So it's that understanding and that awareness of each other and kind of coming together as a close knit. So let's fast forward to now. Things are changing and people are slowly going back to work. For yourself, have you started going back to work?
Yeah, I have actually. I think since it has reopened, I actually have been like busier than I was previously. I think a lot of people, especially in fashion, have like were kind of scrambling to catch up with the work that was missed. So it was like I was actually really busy, which was really, really nice. I mean, I think I had this week off, which is also quite nice because it's, you know, gives me a bit of time to like chill and like process all the stuff that's been happening and like the work that I have been doing. But yeah, it's all kind of, it's interesting how quickly it all started up again, you know. It was almost like it felt like so long during lockdown, and then suddenly it's like we're here again, and you've got this option, and you might work this day, and then like my boyfriend came back and my family returned for a bit, and it's like it's like a big jump, you know.
And in relation to your career, so in modeling and the fashion industry, have you noticed any changes now within that industry as opposed to before COVID?
I think definitely to do with I think things were already changing during COVID. I think like fashion for a long time has placed a lot of emphasis on constant need for like new supply, production, what's next, what's new, like a real kind of spinning wheel, you know. It's constantly being like go, go, go. And I think during COVID, people did start to kind of question the fast-pacedness of it, and like
Okay.
whether we need this many fashion weeks and whether we
Oh
need to
wow.
constantly have this many collections. And like there were a lot of very interesting discussions going on like in the
Mhm.
industry with magazines, publications, about how fashion is going to change coming out of
Mm.
this.
Mhm.
And I think also, again, like financially, you know, that
Yeah.
magazines and publications have been struggling, and fashion in general isn't known for, in some sectors, having loads of money. So it was kind of
Mhm.
like an interesting shift
Mm.
into the, and like it, yeah, COVID kind of halted sales and halted a lot of
Yeah.
production. So it was like, oh, okay, we're kind of stuck for a lot of people. So
Mhm.
I think on many fronts it was quite like made a lot of people step back and take a look at it. And then I think with the Black Lives Matter movement
Mhm.
coming towards the kind of end of lockdown, that also was a whole nother thing that really made people question their relationship with the industry and their impact within the industry. So I
Mhm.
think it was kind of two quite major things that have changed this year. And even though it's not going to change like that, you know, it's not,
Yeah.
they're not going to be these huge upheavals, and the whole structure of, or the whole industry isn't going to be kind of like derailed. I think it has been a very strong start, as in like the conversations are being had, new
Mm.
people are being appointed, you know, people are at least questioning and starting to be slightly more
Yeah.
openly critical, instead of a lot
Mhm.
of stuff happening like behind closed doors. So
Mhm.
I think it's a very positive, kind of quite a positive time to be in fashion,
Mhm.
actually quite an interesting time as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that just reminds me, I know you host a podcast where you speak about creatives who talk about their experience with if they've ever experienced any adversity. How
Yeah.
is that podcast going? And
Mm.
is it still up and running?
So it was with Doc Martin. No, so it was actually it finished actually around Christmas time last year, but then I
Okay.
did a like a kind of a follow up little extra so like episode towards
Mhm.
the beginning of quarantine, which was really nice
Okay.
because actually obviously quarantine was announced and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have nothing to do. And then luckily
Mhm.
the team came to me and was like, we want to do an extra episode and we're gonna do it
Oh
via
wow.
Zoom. And so that was nice as well to like test my skills. And we had two people on it instead of one, like usually it's just one guest. So we
Mhm.
had two people on it. So that was really nice, to kind of connect with people and also connect to work again during
Yeah,
quarantine.
definitely.
But yeah, so that was kind of it. I think that was, it was in like, it was kind of what's the word? It went alongside their autumn winter campaign for last year.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Would you ever bring it back? Because I do think it's very interesting, and I haven't really heard of anything like that. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything like that. And I
Okay.
do think it's a very interesting platform to kind of bring people who within the creative industry and talk about your adversities, because I think it's by talking about what you've gone through, you can help other people who are trying to become be like you or kind of aspire to do what you do.
1,000%.
Um, so I definitely think there's room for it, because I know you, which reminds me as well. I know you speak a lot about your hair, and I know you're loved for your hair, which is back
Not
now.
looking so good now. I need the wash.
I know your love for your hair, but I know you've also spoken about your hair within the modeling industry, and you know the kind of struggles that you've gone through as a model with your hair. So I definitely feel that, you know, there's a platform for that, and you know you should definitely push through with that.
Thank you. Well, I think my
No
thing is, and
worries.
like since I was young, is just being like, you, if you're going to speak on stuff, you can only talk about your experiences and be honest. And I
Mhm.
think the more experiences and the more honesty that we hear, the
Mhm.
less these stigmas will exist. You know, it's like at the
Yeah.
beginning of this when you were like, oh, thanks for being honest. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's true. Like, no one can be angry at you for support, like for your own lived experience, you know.
Yeah.
And there's as much kind of, you know, like I studied media and sociology, and I like engage in a lot of kind of socio-political media and like stuff anyway.
Mhm.
But and that's all great to back it up, but at the end of the day it kind of comes down to like your experiences. And
Mhm.
that's how I chose to write about my hair or my mental health or, you know, whatever else. It's all come from stuff that's I've gone through and then been like, hang on, maybe other people feel this way, or like maybe it
Yeah.
shouldn't be this way, you know. um but yeah, I love the podcast. I think I would love to follow up with maybe not exactly like that, but like
Mm-hmm.
in another avenue,
Mm-hmm.
something
Yeah,
else.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's very creative, and it's like you said, you're talking about your experience, so it gives it that authentic feel as well. Which also leads me on to another question. You know, I know you wear your afro when you're on your modeling campaigns, and thinking about, you know, the Black Lives Matter protest and how people within the Black community, how we're kind of transforming and how we're, you know, advocating for our rights and coming together and sticking together and being kind of proud of ourselves, and, you know, not being kind of scrutinized for being black, and, you know, being our true selves. What springs to mind is the fashion industry and seeing more models wearing their actual afros. That would be a massive transition to see, especially with what's been going on. So hopefully that will be something that we will start seeing more.
Fingers crossed. But I mean, the thing with like natural hair or like chemically treated hair or any type of like afro hair, braids, whatever, when you go on set, I feel like the fashion industry has quite a complex relationship with
Mm,
diversity, and also specifically the subset of black hair, which is why
mm,
that's what I wrote my dissertation on. And like for me, my hair is like my main signifier of my ethnicity. I'm mixed, I'm half black, but I'm obviously very like light skinned, I'm like white
mm,
passing, other than my hair. So it was kind of like my main thing that showed my blackness. And it was also the main thing that, like, when I'd go on set, yeah, people would compliment me on it, but it would also be the one thing that I was made to feel most uncomfortable about, or, you
mm,
know, that people didn't have the tools or the education to be able to
mm.
do. And it was like the one thing that really made me stand out. And I kind of, you know, when I started modeling, I was like, well, hang on, like, and this also isn't just in fashion, this is just in life. Like,
Yeah.
my hair's always been a bit of a talking point, whether it's a good or a bad or a this or that. Like, and I was always a bit like, how come it's the one thing that shows that I'm black that is like sticking out the most to other people, and it's like the most talked about or the most kind of, you know, othered.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and it is kind of, that's where, like, how I came to writing my dissertation, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a coincidence.
Mm,
But it's a lot about like education, feeling comfortable, just the small microaggressions. And I'm very aware that they're microaggressions, especially in
mm-hmm.
comparison to a lot of other experiences. But it is those small microaggressions that just make you feel a bit unwelcome or a bit uncomfortable,
Mm,
that you know that
mm-hmm.
someone with straight hair or like someone who's white wouldn't necessarily experience. And
Yeah.
it's like the microaggression side of it also makes it very hard to call out, because they are these
Mm,
small little subtle things. So you kind of end up just sitting
okay.
there being a bit
Yeah.
uncomfortable and being like, okay.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully that changes, and hopefully these fashion brands and these companies actually look into this and really, you know, because a lot of people have spoken about it. I know I've spoken with Sharifa J, and she also
Mm.
mentioned about her afro. So, you know, it's all about more people talking about it, and these companies and these big brands to really take on what these people are saying, and kind of, you know, bring in, you know, if it, even if it takes bringing in hairdressers, black hairdressers or black makeup artists, bring it in, you know, incorporate it into your brand and your business, and let it be seen and let it be heard, and let people feel, you know, comfortable.
And also just educating, because, you know, there have been so many hairdressers that I've had who have been non-black, who have done my hair amazing, like
Mm,
really learned their craft, like studied up, like just know their shit. And it's
yeah,
like, you don't even have to have my hair to
yeah.
understand how to do it. Or
Mm-hmm.
it'll be someone who doesn't have my type of hair, but they'll ask me because they know,
Mm,
and they're educated enough to know, oh, not all afro hair textures react the
the
same. They're like,
same.
does your hair
Mm,
like oil, does it like water, does it like cream products, does it like, you know, there's
yeah.
like, and I think sometimes people think, and this is in general when it comes to like racial issues, sometimes people think that if they ask that they're going to come across as ignorant. But I think
Yeah.
actually asking is like the opposite, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a way to ask, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I'd rather someone ask me how my hair is and like how
Not
it
answer to.
likes to be handled, because there's some people with similar hair to me who wouldn't even know themselves how mine would handle, because it's different, you know. It's like, ask questions, be open to learning, be open to being educated, instead of just kind of like closing down and like halting yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's very interesting. You know, it's all about kind of being open and not being afraid to ask the questions, and you know, just being true and just being yourself. And that's how we're going to move forward in life and with everything. Just being open, being honest, and having these conversations and not kind of hiding it underneath the carpet. So definitely. So Georgia, before we go, what can we expect from you in the near future?
Honestly, I don't. You'd think after like having 5 months of isolation that I'd have a bit more like coming
Yeah.
up. But honestly, well, so I might have another podcast
Okay,
coming
that sounds
up
good.
soon. Or maybe throw that out there, a little tidbit. And then honestly, just more of these kind of conversations along different
Definitely.
formats, basically. Just running my mouth a bit more.
Yes, yes, we love to hear it. We love to hear it. You know, everyone's got a story. Everyone's voice deserves to be heard. And yeah, I definitely support you and encourage you in everything that you're doing. You truly are an inspiration, and
Oh,
you know,
thank you so much.
thank you for this great conversation, because it's very interesting. And yeah, I learned tips from yourself, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
No
It's so lovely
worries,
to have a
and
chat.
take
And
care.
yes, have a lovely evening.
Yes, and you stay in touch.
Bye. Will do.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for keeping up with myself and Georgia Moot. That was an amazing conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed and you felt encouraged and motivated by this conversation. I will be keeping up with more public figures, so stay tuned for my next interview. Take care and continue to take care of your mental health. Bye.